We're live.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to P.E.P. I'm your host, Leon Theodore. P.E.P. Talk is a frank conversations about the state of education today. Joining the conversation today is Megan Reed, who is Director of Public Policy with America Greater Dallas, and LaWanda Campbell, CEO of the Unfamiliar Place. Welcome, ladies. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having us.
Doing good. Yes, thanks for having us.
Yes, I'm glad you're here. So today's topic is mental health, discipline, and undervalued youth. So the disparities in our school discipline system today, both nationally and here in Dallas, have been highlighted by the recent current events, the use of zero tolerance practices, and the over-disciplining of youth of color, specifically Black youth, does continue the flow of Black boys and girls through the prison pipeline. Our educational system spent vast amounts of money for security services and minuscule amounts of mental and emotional well-being of our youth in school. Systemic racism, racist practices, and policies have impacted communities of color, but specifically Black youth, creating welcome gaps still into our school system. Implicit bias from teachers, administrators, and counselors continually criminalize Black students' behavior while dismissing and minimizing the same behavior in students. Zero tolerance policies and practices are proven not to change the behavior, but increase aggression acting out. The call for restorative justice programming in schools has reached a crescendo. It's time to heed that call. So what I want to do today is talk frankly with you ladies about mental health, discipline, the disciplined population, and thoughts and ideas about what you think the outcome for these students and the education system. And what I'll do is start with you, Madison. Megan.
I was like, I knew you get there.
I'll start with you, let you do a brief introduction, and then we'll move over to LaWanda.
Well, thank you, Leon. So yeah, as he said, I'm Megan Reed. I'm the Director of Public Policy here at Mental Health America of Greater Dallas. If you're not aware of our mission here, our mission is prevention and intervention before stage 4. Our before stage 4 philosophy centers on the idea that if you are able to identify the signs and symptoms of a mental health condition and you are aware of the resources, then you can seek help early before a mental health condition becomes debilitating. So that is part of our philosophy. What I do is I identify policies on the local, state, and federal level that affect our mental health resources, awareness, and stigma. And we look to create greater access to those resources and to eliminate the stigma surrounding mental health. And so today, when we're going to be focusing on schools, I definitely want to talk about the policies in schools that inhibit students from getting mental health, or maybe for teachers or any other supportive staff from getting the help to these students, and also what we can do as a community to eliminate the stigma around mental health. So yeah, that's a little bit about what we do. I'm excited to be on this topic. I'm extremely passionate about mental health in schools, because I do feel that if I would have sought out treatment when I was a child, that I would have had a more fulfilling and sustainable way through my education. So I'm extremely passionate about this topic, and I'm excited to get into it.
Thank you for being here. Thank you very much. What I'm going to have you do a little bit after LaWanda talks is talk about what stage 4 means.
Yeah.
We'll understand what that means. LaWanda, would you like to?
Hi, thank you for having me on again. My name is LaWanda Campbell, and I'm the CEO for the Unfamiliar Place. And what my program is to educate the youth and young adults on mental health awareness, starting with mental health first aid, which is teaching youth and young adults, also adults, how to acknowledge mental health, respond to it, and be a resource for them to get help. And with my program, I also will be working with the youth for peer-to-peer, which we are be educating the youth to be the, I guess, the standpoint to show other youth, okay, hey, I've dealt with this. I know how to deal with this. I know how to identify this, and I'm here to support you. So we want them to support each other. So what better way for youth to understand mental health, or even just having a conversation about mental health versus coming
You broke up, Lawan.
Yeah, I think you went on mute.
loud,
There you
relate better to
You
it.
were on mute real quick. Sorry about that. You were on mute for just a second.
I was on mute.
go. Yeah,
Just a second.
Okay. Yeah, for them to relate to each other. So my goal is to be able to go into the school systems and educate our youth as well as our teachers, so they can identify and work with them to understand what mental health is, and help to get rid of the stigmas associated with mental health, and be able to feel comfortable, and for we can identify and that we can understand what they're going to, what trauma looks like for them, why are they acting out in school, how do we help them versus just suspending them or disciplining in other ways. What are other ways? How can we fix this? So my goal is, I'm really passionate about just educating them and just seeing our youth find a better way for the school system to discipline our youth versus suspending them or sending them up the pipeline of prison or what have you, just to get them more knowledge about how to deal with the situation. So that's what the unfamiliar place is, and that is our goal going forward.
Mhm.
That's fine. Thank you, LaWanda. It sounded like you had it all mapped out before you went on mute, but thank you for that. Megan, that sounds like exactly what would have been beneficial to you early on in your
Oh,
youth.
yeah. Mhm.
So this is very important. I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, LaWanda. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about two things: undervalued youth to start with, and Megan, you talking about stage 4. I don't know if any of you understand what undervalued youth is, or do you know undervalued youth? Do you know what that is?
Could you explain it a little bit more?
Okay, well, so undervalued youth is something we started using instead of at risk, and calling it because for me, at risk says that blame on community and students like it's their fault without taking into account the fact that systemic issues are in play. And when you undervalue something, it says that the problem lies with you. It's that you don't see the purpose or the worth of what you've undervalued. So the students, if we change it to undervalued, we can allocate funding, we can put programming in place that will actually help bring our awareness of the value and come up to their full potential. So that's what we're talking about when we say undervalued youth. I'd like to see that changed from at risk to undervalued so that we can see it different. Could you explain a little bit about stage 4 in the program?
Yeah. So I really loved what you said about undervalued, because it really stresses the point that every individual, every student has potential to really exceed themselves and to reach their goals and their dreams. And what we talk about is stigma and the negative stigma surrounding mental health conditions. A lot of times you see it, really broadcasted in media, movies, that if you have a mental health condition like anxiety or depression, schizophrenia, that it's extremely debilitating, and that these individuals can't live fulfilling lives, but they definitely can. And what typically, when we see individuals at their crisis moment, is at the stage 4 moment. So before stage 4 is just like if you were having a cancer diagnosis or a heart condition diagnosis, you would try your very best and your family members would try their very best to identify those signs and symptoms, get you the help you need, the treatment, the medication, and then you work on your, your self-care, the diet, the exercise, the things that you need to do to maintain. So that's the exact same thing that we can do with mental health. There is evidence that supports that. You can identify a mental health condition based on the signs and symptoms early, very early in its diagnosis. And so you want to catch it at the stage 1 or stage 2 before you start having extreme debilitating conditions like, like with depression, where you are so fatigued and exhausted and your mental health is just where you're not able to concentrate. It starts affecting your work life, your family life. And at stage 4, you start seeing social determinants where you lose your job. You can't make house payments. You're no longer able to live and work a full life, and it becomes debilitating, and it starts to break up your family and your own individual sense of self. So what we say, if you are educated and aware of those stage 1 and stage 2 symptoms and signs, that you then the next steps would be, okay, where do I go see a doctor? Where do I go see a psychiatrist or a counselor? Even just talking to a qualified mental health professional that can just get you to those resources. Those can be done in the early steps so that you don't reach the stage 3 or stage 4 and it starts affecting everything else around you. So, one thing we did talk about is stigma. So that's a huge issue, that if you have a negative stigma, if your family, friends have a negative stigma, that instills fear that you're going to be judged, that you're going to be called out. And so this before stage 4 philosophy is, if we're educating the entire community, and like what LaWanda does is get into the nitty gritty of everything, then we can start talking about it. Everyone is comfortable with the topic, just like how we can talk about cancer and heart conditions. There's no reason not to talk about it. So that's the before stage 4 philosophy. We definitely want to catch this early, identify and treat it. So that's our spiel there.
Thank you. LaWanda, so it sounds like what you're talking about, what you're doing, is the beginning steps of what Megan was speaking about, right? So that's
Correct. And so that's just helping them identify it, because my thing is, if we catch them in the youth, and this is going to eliminate us from having more dysfunctional adults, because we need to catch them when they're young, when it's starting in the very beginning. So we want to give them the knowledge of knowing how to cope and how to deal with, to even identify that they have a mental illness. So we have so many kids in the school system that, what probably, let's say, depression looks like for them, as far as they're not able to focus in class, they're not able to get their work done, they are acting up in class, and a lot of these things are just diagnosed as disciplinary. They're just out of control. They're out of control when it all boils down, it's really a mental health illness, and it's not being identified because, for one, the teachers may not know, the students don't know. So how do we educate them? And that's what mental health first aid is going to do. It's going to educate them and help remove some of the stigmas associated with mental health, because now, for one, we know that, okay, I have a problem. There is help for me, and it's okay because I'm not alone.
nice. The thing I was thinking about, so because when you say, and that's even for me now, like when you say mental health, you always think of the worst of the worst, like the worst case scenario because of TV and media, and you think of things. But when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about racial trauma, we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about, like you said, depression, which is something unfortunately more palatable to like society. So when you say
Right.
depression, it's okay. You know, people are going to say, well, that's not so bad. But when you say mental health, a lot of people, and I know I fall victim to this too, think about schizophrenics. They're going around crazy. They're ready to kill everybody. But we're
Right.
talking about PTSD. We're talking about dealing with depression, with
Right.
parent coming home, and then when we tie in systemic issues, like in the areas in Black society, and we're talking about income disparities and the amount of over policing that are going on in our communities, how people are being treated, you know, things like George Floyd and all of the racial issues that are boiling today. It's hard enough as an adult to deal with that,
Right.
but you know, when you think about your kids having to deal with that, and you see your mom or your dad get locked up and all of those things, that's the mental health we're really talking about
Mm-hmm.
on the larger scale, correct? Am I right or am I wrong in
Oh
assuming?
yeah, most definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, what I would say is a lot of people associate trauma with something physical, you know, maybe a car accident, something that
Mm-hmm.
happened in the house where it was a physical encounter, domestic encounter. But in all reality, if you are witness to something that is extremely, you know, it's just, it over sensualizes, like, you know, you have a very deep sensual, like a, um, impact or release to this instance, you know, some sort of like fight or verbal abuse where they are just negatively. And, you know, you did say racial trauma. So that includes microaggressions. If someone racially calls you out based on your
Right.
race or ethnicity, and it's over and over, this causes a sense of trauma, a sense of fear and what is a fight and flight, where you're like,
Right.
okay, do I need to leave this situation? Do I want to fight my, you know, protect myself? And if you're in this mode all the time, it can create anxiety and depression, the same stimuli that has the anxiety and depression. So a lot of people associate trauma with something physical, and it does not only entail that. And so I
Right.
think if we're looking from a student or a student of color who is Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, that they're going through this, they're seeing these things, they see these things on TV, the news is reporting, I mean, the horrific viewing of George Floyd's death on national television,
Right.
that is a traumatic event for the entire community and on the individual. And for us to
Right.
not be able to really dive a little deeper and be like, okay, how can we help this healing process, not only as a
Right.
parent or as an adult in this person's life, but in the schools? You know, the students are in there, what, 6 to 8 hours a day? You know, it needs to be a safe place physically and psychologically. And if
Right.
we're not able to reach those, you know, those expectations, then we can't expect our students and our youth to grow healthy in these healthy mindsets. Um, so yeah.
Right. And so, even so, adding to that, we have to keep in mind that a lot of students aren't in school. So, we're doing this virtual thing. And so now we have to deal with social media, and we have to deal with the fact that they are now having the depression of being alone because they really are alone. They're at home. They don't have access to teachers or counselors. How are we going to be able to get them ready and help them deal with that? Well, we're not going to get them ready because they're already dealing with it. So, what do we do now in order to help educate them and support them from this virtual world?
Yeah,
Right?
definitely. And
Wow.
you know, that's something, you know, that my organization, we hope to accomplish, is that, you know, there's so much you have to deal with the physical world and the cyber world. I mean, on the
Yeah,
internet, the cyberbullying, the
yeah,
abuse that happens and the videos you see. And I mean, that programming is out there to help educate the kids and educate our teenagers to be safe. And then also to create safe relationships on these areas,
right,
because just like how we have physical relationships, we have new virtual relationships, and that
absolutely.
now we're having those relationships with our teachers. So our WHO program definitely helps out with that.
Yeah,
Nice, nice. I really appreciate you guys' expertise in this. So as an advocate, as someone that does youth justice, um, when I think about school discipline and I think about mental health, you know, I come back to the fact of where we spend our money, right? So we spend money on security services and funding the police. You know, we're not going to go too deep in the defund the police thing, but which is not, which is a misunderstanding of what most advocates are talking about. It's really about putting the money for our kids' welfare. So, you know, when we're talking about Dallas, and we'll talk about Dallas, where the majority of the students do come from undervalued communities. You know, they deal with over policing, they deal with high rates of incarceration, low job opportunities for the parents, which means that the homes deal with issues which cause stress, which causes anxiety. You don't know, you know, what's going to happen day to day. The home life is bad. That increases the rates of domestic violence. All of those things that we know are proven to cause trauma, anxiety, depression, all of the mental health and mental well-being that kids. But these kids are coming to school, and we're not. To me, it feels like we're failing them because we are mimicking society, right? So kids have to, communities deal with harsh zero tolerance policies. They come to school to find safety and hope and for education. And they come to a place where they're singled out because of their actions for being a kid or who they are or the misunderstanding of blackness or blackness being considered a crime, you know,
Right.
and brown youth as well. You know, Latinx kids, especially when we're talking about youth that are worried about ICE and all of that. You know, all of these things we're talking about, and we know cause issues, but we're not spending our money. We're not putting programs in place. We're still relying on something that is proven not to cause change in the actions. Because in the end, what teachers want is the ability to educate all of their students, right? But if you're not, to me as an advocate, if you're not making place for programming that works with the well-being of the students, you're not doing your job.
We don't stop developing until what, 24, 25, maybe even up to 26. And you're telling me that, you know, an 8-year-old is the last straw for mental health support. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I really think that us looking at it in a long-term situation with long-term programming is where I would love to see schools at.
Right.
Wanda, good to
I just think we have to change the perception of what mental health is, starting from the beginning. Like Megan said, we have to start from the beginning and work all the way up, and it has to be streamlined, consistent all the way through. We have to introduce it and continue to iterate. We continue to each year we continue to teach our students math and English. So we have to continue as they develop to teach them about mental health and how to develop them to understand constantly that it's changing. You are changing. So the way you feel and the way you act is going to change. So in order to do that, like we said, we got to start from the bottom and work all the way up to the top and keep it consistent. We have to be consistent, and we have to keep it equal across the board, whether you be Black, white, Chinese, regardless of your race. It needs to be even across the board.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
educating our children across the board, because right now this is what we're, you know, seeing in the system, you know, with the, you know, Black children aren't and brown children are not getting the same as the other children are getting. So we need to be consistent across the board in what we're giving to all children, because yes, our children need it more right now, but across the board, because at the end of the day, we don't educate everyone, then we're still going to have a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So everybody needs to be taught. Let's just keep it consistent, you know,
Yeah.
and bringing in programs like, you know, our pep talk program, just making this conversation normal. This conversation should be normal. We should be having this consistently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Luanda, you brought up a good point. You know, you said, you know, like I think with the mental health first aid, you said that there's a youth, there's a teen, and then there's adult. Like you said, there are different stages in a youth's life that you can't see the signs and symptoms the same, or they're not going to express their mental health the same at 8 as they will at 15. So I think part of that is the education that mental health first aid does, or even just going to small talks like these or webinars, and then talking about leadership. If we're talking about it on an advocacy standpoint, is telling leadership, get your teachers to attend these meetings so that they can feel comfortable with this topic and know that
it should be required that they attend these meetings. It shouldn't even be a option. I mean, it should be normal. This is what we do. This is a part of the program, period.
Right. And it's just our mental health wellness should be as normalized as PE. Mental health curriculum, understanding our own mental health mindfulness could be, K through 12 is the exact same as knowing your physical health. And that's is just as important. And I know, LaWanda, you're probably well aware, but if you have consistent mental health conditions throughout your life that are not getting treated, it'll start to affect your physical well-being. Anxiety causes high blood pressure, it causes headaches, stomach aches, depression. It messes with your diet. It has all these physical factors that they know that adults well into their aging life have developed these things because they did not treat their mental health conditions early. So if
you don't know what you don't know, so we need to know.
Definitely.
I'll step back and just let you guys do what you do. It is a way.
Bye, Leon.
I was going to say that it is a woman's world. So, so it sounds like when you hear you guys talk, which is part of why I'm happy to have you here on a pep talk. Is that what we're calling for, what you're calling for and explaining is a restructuring of how we fund our educational system, how we fund our what programs we put in place, what we prioritize, as students' well-being, because we talk about well-being, but we get so focused on creating cookie cutter kids, right? Yeah, if you don't fit into, it's like forcing a square peg in a round hole, and if you don't fit that, then we just kick you out. And it's amazing, when you talk to, which is for another show, but I'll bring this here. When you talk about youth that had issues. I was talking with one mother the other day, and she was talking about a child and how many issues she went through when he was younger, and now he owns his own paint and body shop, and he's doing all these wonderful things. But they tried to kick him out of 3 or 4 schools, and it really wasn't anything other than him trying to learn how to express himself. And think about, and you hear people say, well, if they don't get it, they just don't get it. They shouldn't cause. But the thing about it is, disciplined populations make up generally, well, in Dallas, they make up about between 23 and 30% of our total enrollment. When you think about that and you say percentage, that means 80%, 70% are making it. But when you make that number, make it into a number, like for Duncanville, that's 3,000, almost 3,000 students. When we're talking Dallas, we're talking a large percentage. We're talking thousands of kids that we're actually saying, well, if they don't get it, they just don't get it. But that brings what you're creating now, what you're not putting value on now, shows up later in your community.
Exactly.
So we're creating like kids that don't have mindfulness, they don't have a care about themselves, they don't understand what's going on with them, and we're sending them out into the community without the ability to survive or provide for themselves. What else are they going to do? And then we complain. So it sounds like you guys are really talking about a restructuring of the education system.
Oh
We
yeah.
definitely need to do that because we're not looking at what is the underlying reason why these children are acting out. So how do we find out that without putting in programs like this? You know, how do we do that if we don't have these programs? We continue to just throw them out.
Okay. So let me ask this question. I'm going to play devil's advocate. So we have SEL programming in Dallas, in the Dallas area. There's we just added 57 new social workers. We did, there's a racial equity office. There's all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we still having these problems, do you think?
So, if we're being hypothetical here, I mean, I'm thinking that, we talked about structure, we talked about training, and then not just initial training, but re-educating. I think we talk a lot about police forces needing re-education on, let's just say, diversity or implicit bias and whatnot. But, anyone that is treating another individual, or, if you're a doctor or a social worker, you have to go to continuing education classes. And I know that teachers do, but, to make mental health at the center of it and to know that, okay, are we doing surveys? Are we really assessing the needs of these students? Are we looking at the behavioral reports and saying, okay, we're not meeting these markers with these students? And I think a huge thing is that our culture has changed dramatically in the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
And so if you're an adult thinking about how your own childhood is, I think, and I know there are a lot of teachers out there who know how to reach their students and they know how to identify with them and empathize. But I think that's part of it, is understanding their mental health in this point in time with everything else going on. And that training is a must. Consistent training through the board, teachers to leadership to school superintendent, and having a plan. And I know on the mental health policy part of it, there are guidance, TEA guidance, but it's just that, it's guidance. It's up to the school districts to implement what they need for their community. And I'm pleading with school districts to, hey, really identify what are the mental health needs. I think a student or an individual with a mental health condition is more likely to be a victim of violence than to commit a violent crime. So if we're looking at mental health students as a danger or a threat, I think that is a total wrong way to go around it. 20 to 25% of the population have a mental health condition. I mean, then you're saying everyone's a threat, and that's ridiculous. And I think we really need to be on the wellness, the health, and intervention of all this. Not, well, they're a threat, we need to do something about it. Discipline. I think that's a wrong way of going.
It is. It's definitely, because Leon, what you're saying is that we're bringing in more of the same thing. You're adding more, but you're adding more of the same thing. How does that help? Because you didn't make any changes. You haven't educated them. You haven't given them the knowledge they need to make a change. You haven't said, here, we're going to change this, and this is the new policy. This is what we're going to do now. You're just saying we're going to add more of what we had, and let's see what happens. Same outcome. What do you expect to get from that?
Right.
Same outcome. So we have to make a change.
Definitely.
We really do. And I'm only laughing again because I'm playing devil's advocate, right? But
now we're mad at you.
I totally agree with you. It is, and that passion is what what we're talking about. And that's what you started off, Megan, talking about like what we're talking about at P.E.P and with Destination Known and all these things that we're putting together. And it's that passion that's gonna help fuel what change is gonna look like. And don't want anyone to ever think is that we're beating up on teachers or downing this, that, and the other. But the fact of it is, if you do the same thing expecting different results, then
exactly.
We need some mental health training there, right? So what we're talking about is I support teachers. What we're talking about doing is bringing in support for teachers, right?
Absolutely.
We're not saying you do something wrong, you're doing something so wrong. But where you are doing wrong, just make a difference, make a change. That's part of what our justice system is supposed to do. Like when we rehabilitate someone, that's part of
Right.
discipline. But discipline has changed because the true meaning of discipline is to lead, right?
Right.
So disciplining someone, you're leading them to what works, and what we're doing is really exclusion, not discipline. And
Right.
that's what restorative justice. I want to switch over to restorative justice now. Restorative justice and mental health, because what we're talking about is restorative justice. We're talking about changing, getting to the root causes so that you
Right.
actually make a change. Because when we say discipline, in the sense that people are using it now, we're saying if we punish them harder, then they'll stop doing what they do. It's scientifically proven not to happen, especially with youth. It actually brings out more aggression. It changes
Right.
how they see themselves, how you see yourself. Is changes how you react and act out. So we've had 20 plus years of zero tolerance and deficit thinking, and we know that it doesn't work. There's
Right.
buku studies and lots of data supporting that. Um, so with restorative justice, what would be your idea, or what are your thoughts on restorative justice and mental health?
So, on the restorative justice outlook, and we're thinking of exclusionary practices. Every day that you take a student out of the classroom, you're limiting their education. You're limiting their ability to learn. And if we don't have a behavioral health or a mental health support for any child that has any sort of disciplinary action, as in bad behavior, and we're not looking at it from a behavioral mental health perspective, they're not getting the ability to learn from what they just did. They're just like, well, that was bad. I got to ISS or I got to OSS, but that doesn't change anything. Like you said, it makes them more aggressive. It makes them upset. It doesn't change the fact that maybe they're having trauma at home or in the school. Are they being bullied? Is there something internal that's going on? I mean, they may have a mental health or behavioral health condition that is just being overlooked. And it's like, if I think it's positive behavior supports and intervention programming. So it's a three-tiered system in which you set up teams, you set up a plan, and you set up basically a way to identify these behaviors. Are they happening routinely? Are they, what's sparking them? What's causing them to have these behaviors? And then for them to work on it, you give them a plan to, hey, this is what you're doing. This is how you address it. Be mindful of what you're doing. And then they learn from these bad behaviors, And so I think that if we're looking to put a stop to exclusion, we do want a stop to exclusionary practices, because they're leaving the room for their general education, and then you're not giving them an opportunity to learn from their behavior. Just like we learn as adults. You do something bad as an adult, you go over the limit on your credit card, you don't do that again. You don't want to. So you learn, and you have to, it's the same thing with social behavior. You can learn from those. You just have to have the ability to. But yeah, if we're looking from a restorative justice position.
Right. We definitely look, you have to look at that, the system as it is now, with the disciplinary system set up the way it is now. It's basically setting up our students on the pipeline to prisons. We basically got a pipeline for prisons, setting them off on a path, saying that, this is the only way, being that you are a problem, we were going to send you up the pipeline. We already set in stone. We're starting with them young, and we set it in stone. We put it in paper saying, hey, this kid is a problem. We're going to pass it on to their junior high school. Now this kid is the problem. Everybody before this kid even has really a chance we've already set in stone that this kid is a problem. So there's no hope for them. So that programming is definitely not, it's just not going to work because they're not a problem. We want to find out what the root problem is and help them. And how do we help them? How do we show them differently right now, as far as we are a resource for you, we are, recovery is possible, help for you is possible. We definitely want to show them that using the systems, that new systems that we have in place with mental health first aid and teen mental health, that there are so many more ways for us to help you than what has been previously shown. So we definitely want to continue to, guide them down the right path. Because what has been put in place is not working.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And when we say, not working, I know that, some students who have multiple ISS or OSS suspensions, they're put in juvenile referral, and you're furthering, once they reach that juvenile detention center, they're less likely to graduate. They're less likely to get the same education as an individual and re-enter as an adult. So you're already setting up these kids into a pipeline, like you said, into this non-returning one-way direction. And, Leon, you said it before, we're looking to the future. And if we're not giving, our students the chance, the potential that they have to excel, then we're just, then we're asking ourselves down the line, why are there so many, citations for homelessness, or for why is the unemployment so high? Why are people not able to have living wage jobs? We're putting them into centers where they're not getting any growth, limited growth, if that. We really need to look for an alternative to focus on the mental health and behavioral health, because we have to give them a chance.
Thank you very much. We really do. So again, I'm going to step over on the other side, and if you were, so then what about those teachers that are, or those counselors that are caring about our kids, that are doing what's necessary, which is, to me, I would hope would be the majority of teachers and counselors and administrators, those that really care, that are really looking out for our kids. What do you say to those, to them? Because then this seems like it can sound like we're bashing them, right?
Yeah.
What do you say to them? Is there something? For me personally, I think they need to double their number, triple their number in school.
Oh yeah.
I think that's the need.
Yeah, but like you said, they're bringing in more, right? They're bringing in more of these counselors and things, and that's great. But now we need more that care, and we need more that are educated. We need more that are ready to provide the support to our students. So we have to get them ready. We're not bashing you. We want to support you. So now we want to come in with our programs, and we're a team. So now we're going to work with you to help get you prepared so that you can now support your students better. So it looks better. So now we are all aware. We all looking for the signs and the symptoms. And so we're all now prepared to now give our students and help our students so that we don't send them down the pipeline, right? So now we can take you and say, hey, Michael or Mary, I understand you're having an issue at home, or you're dealing with some depression or anxiety. We're not going to suspend you. We're not going to send you here. Now we're going to work together. Now this counselor doesn't have to work by herself. She can say, okay, we have pep talk. We can send you to these programs. We have the Unfamiliar Place. We have Mental Health Association of Dallas. We have all these programs that have been in place and they are in place. Now we're going to utilize these and work together as a team. So maybe you can go here and you can go here, but together as a unit, we have a better outcome. And now we walk in with students that have more a positive outlook. They want to be
Lawanda, you went on mute.
Went on mute.
Coming to teachers.
You got passionate.
We feel okay coming to teachers, and we feel okay coming to our counselors, or even to some of our fellow peers saying, hey, can you help me? I'm dealing with this now, because now that stigma, we're getting rid of that stigma, saying that it's a problem, or you're going to look at me differently, or something is wrong with me. It's comfortable. I'm good. My whole support system is great. I got a good system here in school. Whether I do at home, I know when I come to school, I am fully supported and I can make it through this.
Right. And, I think no, that's a great way to go around it, is internally, if you give them the support, if you give them the training, they can go forth and put that upon their students and give them the help that they need. If we're looking at it, I think, Leon, you said, if we're looking at it from a reallocation of funds perspective, are we using our money wisely? I have heard so many counselors in schools say that they don't have a counseling budget, that they are limited in their funds. They aren't able to get the programs or the trainings that they need, and so, we're looking at a statistic here. I think it's around 422 students per counselor in the state of Texas. That's the average. That's a lot of people for one person to track their mental health in a school where they're there for 8 hours. So if
not possible.
Reallocate funds to increase
even more. So
right.
And reallocate funds to support the staff, reallocate funds to increase the workforce, to insert programs, and to, use the money wisely. I think they're opening 15 new schools in the state of Texas. I saw a report that they're opening schools, new construction, and which is great. And I love that they're putting schools into communities. But I also feel that in this time, in our public health and economic crisis, that we need to put more support into our schools. We don't know what the next 5 years are going to look like. And if we're going to think about this wisely, that we need to spend the money wisely and put it exactly where it needs to be. We have evidence of the rise of anxiety and depression in people, not only adults, but in youth and in children, and early as 5, 6, 7, 8. It's where the money needs to go if we want the next 10 years to look more positive in the right direction. And we need to look at not just internally, but from the leadership all into the agency and throughout the state. So on a district level, put the funds where it's necessary, and to give these counselors a chance. If we're not giving them the chance to spend the money, you're already at a wall. You're already pitched the fail, so that's where I'm at. Reallocate those funds exactly where they need to be. I think the districts know. They just need to hear it from the community, and I think that's an important part to this.
Good. We're coming to the close of our time, and what I want to talk about real quickly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an opportunity to say in 2-3 sentences what you think would actually make a difference in the disciplined population, in the education of our youth, and the education of youth that deal with have issues with mental well-being. And I want to make sure I clarify again that does not mean that we're talking the end of the spectrum with schizophrenia, but it does include that. All of those, we're talking about mental well-being, emotional well-being, which we mean depression, we mean trauma, we mean racial issues, economic stressors that cause the anxiety and all of those things. In 2 or 3 sentences, what do you think needs to happen with those youth, our discipline system, and the emotional and mental well-being of our students? To sum it up, what do you, in 2 or 3 sentences, what do you think needs to happen?
That's hard for me. 2 to 3 sentences.
I know, that was a lot, right? That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I think I could. I'll
give
do
you a minute
I'll
to
do
think.
bullet points. We'll do
All right,
bullet points.
give you a minute to think about it.
um,
Go ahead.
yes, I would say community involvement. Every adult that has a child in their life plays a part. They play a role. Every child plays the same role, and this is the root. And then we also have to support each other, and we have to support them. So community involvement. Go to those meetings. Say your voice. Don't be afraid to tell them your concerns. Voice your concerns. Share your experiences. And secondly, like I think we've touched on this several times, we're not bashing anybody. If you're getting the training and for mental health well-being, you yourself are going to be able to identify your own mental health. This is for
Right.
every single person in our community. This is not just for a select few. Yes, we want to make sure and get to those undervalued youth, but we can't do it without you. We have to have your support. And this is, if you're mentally well, then the students that you lead and the people that are in your life will be mentally well if you help them through it. And so I cannot stress enough that your voice and community involvement matters. So I'll leave it at that. I'll talk for another 30 minutes.
Yeah. So I want to piggyback what Megan said. Definitely community. We need to start in our community. We need to start in our homes. We need to fund these programs. Fund these programs for mental health. We need to really, I don't want to say, we need to get rid of the old disciplinary programs that are in place and put in new ones. Educate our system on new ones, and just really fund these programs to put into our schools, into our communities. We need to speak up more. Definitely speak up, because we don't have enough people speaking up. Don't be afraid to speak up. Speak up more about what you need, what you're seeing. People are not aware if we don't start speaking up. The only way people are going to know what we need in our communities if we speak up about what we need, what changes we want to see, and what are we willing to do to make these changes happen. We have to just stand up and step up and be firm in what we want.
Mhm.
So definitely educate, fund, speak up.
Bullet points.
That's the bullet right.
Bam.
We solved the whole problem right there. We just need to hire the right people. But no, so what I want to say, I'm going to say this now. So this was the start to our pep talks. This was our first installment. We started with mental health because mental well-being is essential, right? So that's what that's the new buzzword, and I hate when we talk about buzzwords because it loses its clarity and it loses effectiveness. Just like racial equity and well, all of the things that we're talking about. You know, we have a million racial equity offices, but things never follow through. So, what
Right.
we'll talk about next, we're going to start talking about racial equity and the classroom. We're going to talk about referral systems. So we're going to piggyback off of this with teachers and referrals. But we're going to follow in a line that's going to build up to discipline and the law, right? So I thank you, ladies, for joining us for starting us off on our first talk with mental health awareness and mental health well-being. I think it's necessary. I know it's necessary. I believe everyone is aware that it's necessary. I think we just need to change how we fund and where we put our money. I'm gonna shout out somebody, Bill Betson. He pushes for transparency, and you know both of you guys talked about that earlier. We need some true transparency in where we spend our money in our educational system.
Right.
It's not, we don't even know where it's going, and money seems to be
Yeah.
going in the door and out without any changes for our
Right.
students. We're looking for something better. So thank you for making the first pep talk a great talk. And I look forward to continuing to work with you ladies. And I know some doors are going to get knocked down. So thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
And everyone have a great day.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
You do the same.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.